When you go through heartbreak, when someone you love turns away or chooses someone else, the first impulse of the human mind is to chase, to explain, to convince, to fight for clarity or at least for closure. It feels like something is slipping through your fingers and you want to tighten your grip so it doesn't disappear completely. But the truth is, the more tightly you hold on, the faster it slips away. Not because love isn't real, not because the connection wasn't meaningful, but because attachment creates pressure. And pressure creates distance. And this is why the first and most powerful shift you can make is a shift that happens completely inside you. A shift from outward focus to inward focus. Many people misunderstand this. They think silence is a tactic, a trick, a way to make someone miss you. But silence is not a tactic. It is a byproduct of returning home to yourself. It is the space where you begin to reclaim your own energy instead of scattering it into places where it's not valued. And when someone walks away from you, you must understand something deeply. The energy that is chasing them is the same energy that tells them they made the right decision by leaving. But the energy that turns inward, that settles into stillness, that becomes grounded, that grows in self-awareness, that energy makes them pause. It makes them think. It makes them question themselves. You see, when you stop trying to be heard by someone who stopped listening, you begin to hear yourself again. When you stop trying to be seen by someone who chose to look elsewhere, you begin to see yourself again. And this shift, this quiet rediscovery of your own presence, is far more powerful than any words you could send. The words you speak in fear never reach the heart of another. But the silence born from self-respect, that silence echoes. People feel when you detach. They feel when your emotional grip loosens. They feel when you stop thinking about them every moment of every day. And the moment your energy stops clinging, theirs begins to drift back toward you. Not because you forced anything, not because you begged, but because you finally allowed space. And space is where reflection lives. Space is where regret begins. But this shift inward is not easy. The mind will resist. The heart will tremble. You will feel the urge to check their social media, to see if they're happy without you, to see if the new person is taking your place. You will feel the impulse to reach out just to remind them you exist, or to convince them that what you had wasn't meant to end like this. But every time you give in to that impulse, you send your power outward. Every time you chase, you break your own spirit a little more. And every time you expect them to give you closure, you refuse to give it to yourself. The shift inward begins the moment you decide that your peace is more important than your pride, and your healing is more important than your fear of losing them forever. You reclaim your energy piece by piece. You stop reacting. You stop explaining yourself to someone who already made their choice. You stop trying to pull them back into your life. Instead, you take a deep breath and turn toward the one person who needs your attention the most, you. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you begin to ask yourself a different question. What do I feel? Not what do they feel? Not what are they thinking? Not what are they doing with someone else? But what is happening inside me? Because when your attention is stuck on someone who left, you abandon yourself without even realizing it. Your own needs become invisible. Your own wounds remain unattended. Your own path becomes unclear. And so the shift inward is a return to the place where your value lives. You might find that when you stop chasing, there is discomfort. There is silence that feels heavy. There is loneliness that feels sharp. But within that discomfort is your transformation. The silence that feels heavy at first becomes peaceful over time. The loneliness that feels sharp becomes clarity. And the stillness you feared becomes the medicine your heart needed. There is a difference between letting go and losing someone. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean the love was meaningless. It simply means you stop carrying what is not yours. It means you stop holding the weight of someone else's absence. It means you stop giving your energy to situations that feed on your weakness instead of your strength. And here is the paradox. When a woman truly shifts inward, when she no longer sends her energy outward, when she no longer begs for validation or waits for attention, she becomes something that is impossible to ignore. People notice when you detach. They feel the absence of your presence. They feel the shift in your energy. And often, the same person who walked away begins to wonder why the emotional cord they relied on suddenly feels disconnected. But you must understand that this shift cannot be faked. You cannot pretend to focus on yourself while secretly monitoring everything they do. You cannot go silent while secretly hoping they will panic. You cannot withdraw while constantly stalking their life from the shadows. True inward shift is honest. It is a commitment. It is the moment you say, I choose myself first. I honor my peace. I protect my spirit. And when you make that shift, something remarkable happens. You become lighter. You become clearer. You become grounded. Your energy stabilizes. You stop reacting. You stop overthinking. And slowly, pieces of yourself that were scattered come back to you. The version of you that was overwhelmed begins to breathe again. The version of you that felt ignored begins to feel whole. And the version of you that was desperate begins to fade. Then one day, without even meaning to, you wake up and realize that you haven't thought about them in the same painful way. You realize that the emotional weight is gone. And ironically, it's usually around that time that they feel your absence the most. They may start checking, wondering why you haven't reached out. They may start asking mutual friends about you. They may even try to reconnect. Because when someone feels your energy shift inward, they sense that something valuable is no longer available to them. And the scarcity of what was once abundant creates desire. But your goal should not be to make them come back. Your goal should be to become someone whose presence commands respect, whose silence carries meaning, and whose self-worth is unquestionable. When someone sees that you are no longer attached in the same way, they begin to remember the moments you gave them your love. They begin to replay the memories. They begin to feel the loss that you felt alone for so long. It is that realization that they no longer have access to you the way they once did that triggers regret. This is why the shift inward is the foundation of everything. Because no matter what happens next, you win. If they return to a version of you that is stronger, wiser, and no longer dependent on their approval. If they do not return, you are already moving forward with a heart that has rebuilt itself from the inside. There comes a moment after losing someone, after feeling abandoned, after watching a person you once loved choose someone else, when you begin to realize something deeper. The version of yourself that was left behind is not the version of yourself you are meant to remain. And the truth is, nothing shifts the dynamic between two people more powerfully than growth. Not the loud kind of growth you post online, not the kind of change you announce, but the quiet, consistent transformation that happens when you decide you will no longer live as the woman who begged, who chased, who questioned her worth because someone else couldn't recognize it. This is where everything begins to shift. When you stop trying to change him, you begin to change yourself. When you stop asking why he didn't choose you, you begin to understand why you must choose yourself. And when you stop waiting for him to value you, you begin to build a life where your value is no longer dependent on another human being. Transformation is not about proving anything. It's not about making him jealous. It's not about showing him what he lost. It's about stepping into the version of yourself that you abandoned while trying to love him. Because somewhere along the way, you gave him the parts of you that were meant to be nurtured by your own hands. You gave him your time, your softness, your energy, your dreams, and sometimes even your identity. And when someone holds that much power over your sense of self, losing them feels like losing yourself. But the truth is, you didn't lose yourself. You simply forgot where you placed your strength. And life has a way of guiding you back to it, especially when someone leaves. You are not meant to stay broken. You are not meant to stay small. You are not meant to shrink yourself so someone who couldn't understand your depth feels comfortable. You are meant to rise. And sometimes it takes heartbreak to wake up the part of you that has been sleeping. Growth begins in silence. It begins in the mornings when you wake up and decide you will not check his profile anymore. It begins in the moments when the memories try to drown you, but you choose to breathe instead of break. It begins when you pick up the pieces of your life and refuse to see them as fragments, but as foundation stones for the woman you are becoming. And the woman you are becoming is powerful. Not because she is trying to be strong, but because she is learning to understand herself. She is learning to embrace her own presence. She is learning to walk alone without feeling lonely. She is learning to speak kindly to herself. She is learning to build habits that uplift her instead of habits that drain her. And these changes matter much more than you realize. Because when you evolve, your energy changes. And when your energy changes, the way people respond to you changes. Even the one who walked away begins to feel the shift. It may not happen immediately. It may take weeks or months. But at some point, the person who once took you for granted notices that something about you is no longer the same. You are not crying the way you used to. You are not waiting for his attention. You are not reaching out. You are not asking for explanations. You are not clinging to the past. You are not living in the shadow of the memory. You are moving. You are growing. And growth creates distance, not the painful kind, but the powerful kind. And from that distance, something unexpected happens. The emotional dynamic begins to reverse. The same person who was so sure he could replace you starts to feel that you are becoming someone he can no longer reach. He begins to sense that you are evolving into a version of yourself that no longer revolves around him. And the human mind, by nature, desires what it can no longer easily access. This is not manipulation. This is psychology. People chase what feels rare. They chase what feels strong. They chase what feels elevated. They chase what feels rooted in self-worth. And when you grow, you become all of these things without even trying to be. But the point is not to make him chase you. The point is to grow into yourself so deeply that being chased becomes irrelevant. Because the real power lies not in whether he comes back, but in what version of yourself he would be coming back to. Imagine for a moment becoming a woman who is anchored in discipline. A woman who wakes up with intention instead of anxiety. A woman who invests in her mind, in her body, in her spirit. A woman who surrounds herself with people who uplift her. A woman who knows where she is going. A woman who has standards that are no longer negotiable. A woman who no longer breaks just because someone walked away. A woman who chooses her peace above all else. This version of you is not a fantasy. She is waiting behind every small decision you make. Every time you choose to work on yourself instead of waiting for someone else to validate you, you move closer to her. Every time you choose growth instead of bitterness, you move closer to her. Every time you choose healing instead of hurting, you move closer to her. Every time you say, I deserve better than this, you move closer to her. And when you become her, something remarkable happens. You stop wanting the person who left as much as you once did. You stop seeing them as the center of your world. You stop needing their approval. You stop desiring their attention. And you begin to see yourself clearly, maybe for the first time in years. This is the irony of growth. When you evolve into your higher self, the person who hurt you often realizes it before you do. They see the shift in your energy. They see you becoming lighter, more confident, more grounded. They see you stepping into a life they can no longer control. And it is at that moment that regret begins to take root. But the truth is, the real victory is not in making him regret. It's in realizing you never needed him to begin with. Growth reveals truth. It reveals whether someone is capable of meeting the new version of you. It reveals whether they have the maturity to recognize your worth. It reveals whether they can rise with you or whether they will stay behind. And if they stay behind, your growth makes it easy to walk forward without turning back. It is the awakening of your true self. There is a moment, after all the chaos of heartbreak, when your mind finally becomes quiet enough for you to realize a truth that changes everything. Not every emotion deserves expression, not every thought deserves a reaction, and not every situation requires your voice. Some things are more powerfully handled through stillness. Some situations resolve faster when you stop feeding them with your energy. And some people understand your value only when the silence becomes louder than your words ever were. Silence is not about ignoring someone. It is not about pretending you don't care. It is not about playing games. Silence is an act of emotional mastery. It is the moment you choose your peace over your impulses. It is the moment you stop trying to change what is not in your control. And it is the moment you realize that responding to every situation only drains you further into the emotional chaos that someone else created. You must understand something. When someone pulls away from you, when they choose someone else, when they no longer offer clarity or honesty, your immediate instinct is to speak up, to demand explanations, to ask questions, to express your pain. But the truth is, most people who leave do not walk away because they do not know what they are doing. They walk away because they have already made up their minds. And no amount of talking, explaining, or pleading can undo a decision that was made in silence to begin with. This is why your silence becomes your strength. When you choose not to react, when you choose not to chase, when you choose not to argue, you shift the entire dynamic instantly. You stop playing the role of someone desperate for answers and step into the role of someone grounded in self-respect. Silence communicates what your words never could, that you are not willing to lose yourself in the effort of trying to keep someone else. There is a deep truth about human psychology. People hear silence differently depending on their conscience. Someone who never cared will not be moved. But someone who walked away with doubt, someone who left for the wrong reasons, someone who knew your value but was too blind to appreciate it. For that person, silence becomes unbearable. It forces them to think. It forces them to question themselves. It forces them to feel the absence of your presence. Your silence creates a mirror. It reflects back to them the choices they made. And because you are no longer filling the space with your emotions, the emptiness reveals what they have done. People often run from their own reflection, and as long as you are reacting, they don't have to face it. But when you stop reacting, they no longer have anything to hide behind. That is why silence is powerful, because it places the responsibility back where it belongs. And yet, emotional silence is not easy. You will feel the temptation to break it. You will feel the ache in your chest that wants to send that one message. You will feel the urge to tell them how much they hurt you. You will feel the longing to reach out, not because you don't understand your worth, but because you miss the connection. Your heart will crave the familiarity. Your mind will try to convince you that speaking up will fix things. But every time you break the silence without receiving the respect you deserve, you give away pieces of your dignity. You cannot expect someone to hear your voice when they never valued your presence. And you cannot ask someone to understand your pain when they were the ones who created it. Your healing does not come from their acknowledgement. It comes from your decision to detach with grace. When you master emotional silence, you detach without bitterness. You withdraw without making a scene. You pull back without trying to make them feel guilty. You simply stop offering what is no longer appreciated. And that level of emotional maturity is rare, which is why it is so unforgettable. There is a difference between being silent out of fear and being silent out of strength. Fearful silence feels heavy, anxious, expectant. It waits for a response. It watches the phone. It wonders why nothing is changing. But strong silence is different. It does not wait. It does not hope for instant change. It does not need closure from someone else. It is a silence that comes from understanding the situation so clearly that you no longer feel the need to argue with reality. Strong silence says, I see what you chose. Now I choose myself. And this, more than anything, changes how someone remembers you. You must understand something. A person does not regret losing you because of what you said. They regret losing you because of what they no longer have access to. Your warmth, your kindness, your softness, your presence, your emotional availability. When you go silent, you take all of these things with you. You remove the comfort of knowing you're always there. And the moment they feel that absence, the mind begins to replay everything they once overlooked. People start to miss what they didn't value when it's no longer theirs. And silence is what makes them realize that it is no longer theirs. But the purpose of silence is not to make someone come back. It is to protect your emotional clarity. It is to give yourself the space to breathe. It is to stop giving your energy to someone who no longer knows how to hold it. Silence allows you to separate what you feel from what you deserve. It allows you to see the situation without the fog of emotional noise. And it allows you to rebuild the parts of yourself that were weakened by constantly responding to someone who didn't respond to you. Silence gives you power because it gives you perspective. It gives you the distance needed to see things clearly. It gives you the emotional strength to recognize that your value was never dependent on someone's ability to see it. And as you grow from within, as you step into your new energy, the silence becomes less about holding back and more about honoring yourself. But here is the paradox. The more silently you heal, the more loudly your absence speaks. The more calmly you detach, the more deeply they feel the loss. And when someone sees you moving forward without demanding anything from them, without begging for closure, without trying to prove your worth, something shifts inside them. They begin to question why you are no longer reacting. They begin to feel the difference between your presence and your absence. They begin to realize that losing you may have been the biggest mistake they made. Silence forces a person to confront their decision without the distraction of your voice. It makes them wonder what is happening inside you. It makes them wonder if you have moved on. It makes them wonder if the connection meant more to them than they admitted. Silence opens the door for reflection, but not yours, theirs. You, meanwhile, walk a different path, a path of clarity, a path of emotional discipline, a path of inner balance. You stop looking back. You stop reacting to every thought. You begin to trust your own strength. And in that journey, you discover a version of yourself that doesn't need to shout to be powerful. She doesn't need to explain to be understood. She doesn't need to argue to be heard. She simply exists in her truth, and her truth speaks for itself. This is the power of mastering emotional silence. It is not the silence that hides. It is the silence that heals. It is the silence that transforms. It is the silence that says, I will not abandon myself just because someone abandoned me. When you become the woman who no longer reacts, who no longer clings, who no longer pleads, who no longer exhausts herself trying to make someone understand her worth, you shift the balance of power entirely. You step into your self-control. You step into your inner wisdom. You step into the version of yourself that holds dignity above desire. And that version of you is unforgettable.